What you need to start building your own web applications with Spring. What you need to start building your own web applications with Spring Boot 3. Dan Vega created this course. He is a Spring Developer Advocate, course creator, and speaker.
Welcome to this course, Building Web Applications in Java with Spring Boot 3. My name is Dan Vega. I'm a Spring Developer Advocate at Broadcom, a Java champion, and really excited to be here with you today on this journey. So I want to start off by thanking everyone at Free Code Camp for having me. I'm a big fan of Free Code Camp, and I'm a big fan of the courses that are on the platform. So I'm excited to be a part of that. So today, we're going to go on a journey together and learning the most popular Java framework around for building applications, and that is Spring. Spring is massive. There are so many things that you can do with it. We're going to kind of narrow it down today, but we're going to have a lot of fun. I will go ahead and leave some links. If you want to learn more about me, danvega.dev is my homepage. I have a YouTube channel, so if you enjoy videos around Java and Spring, we're going to have a lot of fun. I will go ahead. Ahead and leave Spring. You can visit me there. Also, if you want to learn more about Spring and continue this journey, I'm an instructor on Spring Academy, which has a bunch of free resources for learning Spring. So go ahead and check them out there. With that, I don't have any slides. We are developers. I have a GitHub repo with a README in it. So if you head over to github.com/danvega, FCC for Free Code Camp -spring-boot-3. I'll leave the link in the description below. That is the repo for all of the code that we're going to go today, but more importantly, the README that we're going to jump through right now. So there's a quick agenda on here. I don't want to dive too far into this because we'll talk about that as we get into it. But Module 1, just a quick introduction. I want to make sure you understand who I am. Really quickly, what are the outcomes? What are the prerequisites for this course? What should you know? And then a real quick intro to what is Spring. Why should you care about learning this thing? Module 2 is we're going to create the project. We'll get familiar with the IDE and how to run the code and where to put your code and how to write the code and some things like DevTools and logging. So that'll kind of get us started, get our feet wet, get us off the ground. Module 3 is, hey, we're building a REST API here today using Spring MVC. We're going to do this in memory. We're not going to talk to a database yet. We'll kind of, again, walk before we can run. And we'll talk about all the mechanics to build a REST API. From there in Module 4, we'll switch over our in-memory collection of things to a database. So we'll talk about all things related to setting up a database in Spring. Module 5 is talking about the REST client. If you're in a Spring application and you need to talk to another service, this is something we have to do in a lot of organizations. How do we do it in Spring? What are the different options? How can I use them? Finally, Module 6 is testing. Now, I know we don't usually save tests for last, but I feel like when you're learning something new, trying to throw in the mechanics of writing tests at the same time can be a little bit overwhelming. So normally I would write a particular class and then write a test for it, kind of TDD style, if you will. In this case, we're going to write the application, and then I'm going to come back and talk to you about what's in. You don't have to opt in, it's already there. And we'll talk about some of the tests that I would have written along the way, just to give you an idea of how to write tests. I'll leave you with some resources, and that'll be the course. It's a lot of information packed into a pretty nice time, but I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this. So quick, who am I? I'm a husband and a father. I have 2 daughters, #girl dad. We live outside of Cleveland, Ohio. I am a Spring developer advocate at Broadcom. So I get to go around and talk about Spring, but I want to make sure we understand that I have been an advocate of Spring long before anybody was paying me to do so. This goes back years. I've been a big fan of Spring. Spring was previously held by Pivotal and then by VMware. VMware got acquired by Broadcom, and that's how I got to where I am now. I was recently named a Java champion, which is really, really exciting. So I'm super proud of that. I am a Spring Academy instructor. So we have a academy if you want to learn all the different things with Spring or about all of the different projects in various languages, most of which have been on the JVM. But I've been doing this a long time and I enjoy what I do. So if you're going to take this course, what are some prerequisites that you should have? Well, first off, we should have some fundamentals of Java. We need to know the Java programming language to build Java applications. I would say anywhere from beginner to intermediate. Beginner, if you really want to if you really are able to learn on your own, great. Just some fundamentals of the Java language. So we need JDK 17 or more. Right now, the current version is 21. The latest version, which at the time is 3.2.3, different. I'll try and explain those as we go. If you have questions as a Windows user, try and ask them, and I'll see if we can answer them. So if you're a Java developer, you should have a little bit familiar with some build tools. So once you get past kind of the hello world in Java, you need these build tools to manage your application, right? Like, hey, these are the dependencies that my application is going to have. These are the build plugins. Like, this is a paid version. I pay for this. I have paid for this on my own monthly. Well, now I think I pay yearly, but at the time it was monthly. And for the value of how productive I am in this tool, it wasn't a lot. They're not sponsoring this video. This is just my personal thoughts on this. But there is a free version of the Ultimate Edition. So the paid version, you can get a 30-day trial. If you've not done that yet, go ahead and do that. There's a Community Edition, which you can use, which doesn't have all of the features, but I'll try and point those out as we go. You can also use something like Spring Tool Suite that is available in Visual Studio Code and Eclipse. One thing I try to tell everyone that I talk to when I'm teaching is to use whatever tool you're most productive in. If that is somehow Notepad or a terminal with Vim, so be it. I want you to be productive, whatever tools you use to be.
This full stack manager application from scratch. The course integrates the dynamic duo of Next.js and React on the front end with Prisma as the ORM for efficient database management using MongoDB.
This just happens to be the one that I'm most productive in, so I use that. We'll need an API testing tool. So if you've never tested a REST API, we'll go through the mechanics of it, but there are tools like Postman. You can do this on the command line using something like curl or HTTPIE, which is like curl for humans. You can actually use it and read it and understand it.
All right, and we can toggle the light and dark mode. Okay, and with the courses page,
Postman collection and the HTTP client collection for IntelliJ. So whatever one you're using, you should be able to download the collection and not have to write all these API tests yourself. Docker Desktop is not a hard requirement. We are going to use an in-memory database until a certain point, and then we'll swap it out for a PostgreSQL database. But we'll do so using Docker and around Docker Compose, which are really great. I'm excited to talk to you about those. So that's our prerequisites. What is the outcome of this course? So a lot of people ask me, like, how can I learn Spring, Dan? Well, that's a big loaded question because Spring can do so many things. We're going to look at that in the next section. Spring can do so many things. So when you ask me, how can I learn Spring? Boy, you better have a long time. REST API that talks to a database. Now we have a much more focused learning path. And that's what we're going to do today. We're building a REST API. It talks to a database. I'm going to teach you some of the mechanics around that, some of the things that I've learned over the years, some best practices. We'll write some tests as we saw. And yeah, we're just going to learn a whole bunch of those things. So what is Spring? What can it do? What can it do? We'll talk about that in a second. How to build a web application, how to test it, how to interact with the database. What are we going to build? We're building a fitness application that allows you to track runs through our REST API. That's not the important part. The important part here is to take what you've learned and apply it to your own project. After you're done with this course, you really need to go the link in the description below. That boot-3, I'll leave the link in the description below. That is the repo for all of the code that we're going to go today, but more importantly, the README that we're going to jump through right now. So there's a quick agenda on here. Go through the mechanics of doing it yourself and not relying on me being able to tell you what to do. So take this and apply it to whatever you're interested in. If you like cooking, create a recipe REST API. If you like lifting weights, go ahead and create an application like that. So whatever you're interested in, try to apply this after we're done here. And then I think that will kind of really help cement some of the things we're going to go through. What and why is Spring? So I'm going to click on this link. It's going to take me over to spring.io. This is the main website for Spring. We'll get into why in a second. So what can Spring do? Spring allows you to build so many different types of applications. Do you want to build microservices? So you have a bunch of services in an organization that kind of talk to each other. There's some really great benefits to building microservices, big buzzword these days, right? Independently scalable. So if we have one application that just needs to scale more than others, microservices are great. You can build reactive applications, so non-blocking applications. So we know in kind of the Java world where we have this thread per request, we want to be able to not block our applications. We want to be able to scale better. That is the case with reactive web applications. But JDK 21 just came out. There are these things called virtual threads. So if you're in a blocking style application, there are ways to kind of scale those applications now as well. Cloud is big. We talk about, and actually I wonder if we go into Spring Cloud, there's a video that we recently did, and I'm going to just jump there now. So if you go into projects and you go look at all the different projects in the ecosystem, here's Spring Cloud. There's actually some videos on here. We did a Spring Office Hours video. So this is a podcast that me and my coworker Deshaun run. And we did a video where we kind of talked about all the different projects in Spring Cloud at a high level and what they do. And this was really fun because we talked about Spring Cloud is basically the tool to build distributed applications in the cloud. And when you're doing this, a lot of common patterns are going to come up that you're going to need to handle. And Spring Cloud gives you the tools for doing that. So that's Spring Cloud. Web apps, that's what we're going to focus on today, building an MVC application that talks to a database.
Hello, we're here
you can also use Spring for building
freecodecamp.org YouTube channel, and we're about to introduce a new JavaScript curriculum from freecodecamp.org. And I'm here with Jessica Wilkins, who's going to be talking about it. So
serverless applications. Hey, I want a function to sit on AWS Lambda service And when I send it a request, it will spin up, handle that request, do what it needs to do, and then shut down. We can work with event-driven applications. We can work with batch applications, so much more. Another thing that I don't see listed on here that I've been using Spring for a lot more lately is building CLI apps. So if you want to build a CLI, you might think, well, I would reach for something like Bash, Dan. And that's great, but I don't use Bash every day. So I forget how to like even do the simplest of things. So I would be running over to ChatGPT and asking ChatGPT, how do I do a for loop in Bash, right? So with Spring CLI, I can build those interactive command line applications using the tools that I'm familiar with. That's a little bit of what can Spring do. If you go into why, here's some great information on it. Again, it's the world's most popular Java framework. Here's a really good quote from Dick's Sporting Goods. So we use a lot of the tools that come with Spring Framework and reap the benefits of having a lot of the out-of-the-box solutions and not having to worry about writing a ton of additional code. So again, we're starting with a web app, but what if you need to talk to a database? What if you need to build for the cloud? What if you need to build reactive web applications? All of those tools are in the ecosystem here. All of those projects are here for you, and they all integrate seamlessly, which is really great. So Spring is everywhere, flexible, productive, fast, secure, supportive. Again, what can Spring do? I think there was another quote on, yeah, this is a good one. So if you don't know, Netflix is a huge Spring user. And it says most of our services today are based on Spring Boot. I think the most important thing that Spring has just been very well maintained over the years. That is important for us in the long term because we don't want to be switching frameworks every 2 years. So Spring has a huge engineering team. We have releases on the Spring framework side every year. On Spring Boot, we have releases every 6 months. And yeah, I think that's an important piece. So thanks, Paul, for that quote. So you can go into why, learn about that here. You can go into learn. You can learn like an overview, how to get started quickly, but we're going to do that today. There are some really good guides. These are kind of quick 15-minute to 30-minute, how do I do this one specific thing? So those are great, but I'm going to show you those on Spring Academy in a second. There's a blog, so get caught up, stay caught up with what's going on in the ecosystem. And actually, I think if I go to overview, yeah, so here's the latest videos. Our Spring Office Hours is one of the latest videos on here. Josh Long, who's a legend in our community, has a podcast on Spring. You can go ahead and check that out. Here are some popular guides. Projects we'll come back to in a second. I mentioned the Spring Academy. If you go over to Spring Academy, you'll see that there are some courses there. We also have these guides. These are the same guides that are on Spring I/O, but not all have been ported to the Spring Academy yet. The nice thing about these is that you can do this in the browser. So this thing, I want to build an application with Spring Boot. You go through and there's an integrated lab environment where you can walk through and do this yourself here. So really exciting. Check out Spring Academy for that. Then we have solutions. So if you want to get support at a commercial level, check out the Tanzu Spring Runtime. We have some community and even that all important dark mode. So quickly, we're going to go into projects. We're going to click on the overview. These are all the different projects in the ecosystem. So when you go into a project, you'll be given an overview. You'll be given a learn section. This is where all the documentation is. So here's the reference docs. Here are the API docs. So if you want to get at the APIs, that's important. And just as important, the support timelines. What is the open source support? What is the commercial support timelines? So I'm going to go to Spring Boot. We're going to be going through Spring Boot today. If you go into the Learn section and you go into the reference docs, here is like, hey, how do I get started with Spring Boot? So I can go in and click into a section, get started. These are some of the things we've talked about before, but just documentation is really great. One of the things about Spring that you have to know is that it's been around forever, right? We just celebrated 20 years of Spring, 10 years of Spring Boot. This is really great, but it also means that if you go out there and search for a question on Google, you might get 10 different answers. And how do you know which one is up to date, which one is the right one? So I suggest first line of defense is always starting at the documentation, because this is constantly being updated. This is being managed by the Spring team. This is a really good place to start. All right, and then there's some resources here. I'm going to update this. The reason I wanted to do this in a README is so we can constantly update this and help you out. I'll put some notes in here. If I see issues come up, we can go ahead and add those to this repo. This is kind of our home for everything that we're doing today. So that was our intro. We're calling that Module 1. Module 2 is going to be getting started, creating your first project, writing your first code in Spring. And I think we'll go ahead and do that now. So I really hope you enjoy this course. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun on this journey, and I'm excited about it, and I hope you learn a lot. So with that, let's go ahead and head to Module 2. All right, so the best way to kick off a new Spring Boot project is by using the Spring Initializer at start.spring.io. So I'm gonna go through a couple options here. We're gonna create our first project, and then we'll go ahead and write some code. So we start off with, what is the project type? What is the build tool? So I mentioned in the prerequisites that it'd be nice to know if you had some experience with Java build tools like Maven or Gradle. And this is where those come into play, because you need to pick a project type. I'm going to choose Maven. If you want to choose Gradle and you've used that before, there's nothing wrong with that as well. In fact, it's the default. So language, I'm not Maven project to kick off a dots, and then we'll go ahead and write tools. So I mentioned in the prerequisites that it'd be nice to know if you had some experience with Java build tools like Maven or Gradle. And this is where those come into play, because you need to pick a project type. I'm going to choose Maven. If you want to choose Gradle and you've used that before, there's nothing wrong with that as well. In fact, it's the default. So language, I'm going to pick Java. You can also use Kotlin or Groovy. And then we need to pick the version of Spring Boot that we're going to use. I recommend using the latest stable version, which at the time of this recording is 3.2.3. You can always upgrade this in your application, so don't worry about it. Just pick the latest stable if you want. So now you got to fill in some data about your project. And the way this works is you have a group and an artifact, and you usually use the reverse domain. So my personal website is danvega.dev. So I'll use the reverse of that, which is dev.danvega. And then the artifact is, what are we building here today? What is the application called? So in this case, it's called runners, and we'll go ahead and use that name. You could fill in a description, a package name, anything else is fine. Now you got to pick a version of Java. So we talked about at the beginning, to use Spring Boot 3, you need at least Java 17. I'm going to pick Java 21, but I don't think you need to. So if you're on Java 17, that's fine. Now we get to the point where we pick our dependencies. So what are dependencies? So when we're building out bigger or larger applications, enterprise type applications, they're usually made up of a bunch of different projects, right? It's not just like Java code. There is, hey, I need to use this project and use that project and use these two projects. And that's how you kind of build these larger style applications. In the world of Spring, Spring has a bunch of different projects in the ecosystem. and it will allow you to kind of construct your application. I liken this to going to the grocery store, having an idea of mine in mind of what you're going to cook tonight, right? If I'm going to make a steak and potatoes and a glass of wine, like I understand the ingredients that I need to get as I'm going into the store. So as we're coming here to start.spring.io, I need to have an understanding of what I'm trying to build today. Remember, Spring does all of these different things. It can build all these different types of applications. So I need to have an idea of what I'm here today. And we do. We're building a web API today. So we're building a Spring MVC app that talks to a database. Now, the nice thing is these dependencies are just kind of quick starters. Like it encapsulates all the functionality of, say, building a web app. But you don't need to know everything you're going to do today. For instance, we're going to talk to a database at some point, but I'm not going to pick the data stuff yet because we're not there yet. So when I go into dependencies, I'm going to search for web, and I'm going to choose that. The other one I'm going to choose dependencies, I'm going to search for web data stuff yet because we're not there yet. So when I go into dependencies, I'm going to search for web, and I'm going to choose that. The other one I'm going to choose is the Spring Boot DevTools, and this is some really nice features for development mode. So we're going to choose those. And that's all we need. From there, I want to show you just a quick couple of things. You can go to Explore and see what code it's going to create for you. Choose both things. You can go to Explore and see what code it's going to create for you. Again, this is strapping your application. This isn't generating code based on what you're selecting there. So there's that. Then there's a share button. If you want to go ahead and copy this, you can send this to someone else and it will pre-populate the Spring Initializer for them here, which is really nice. So with that, you're going to go ahead and click Generate. You're going to generate that. It is going to download a zip file. You're going to open that up in whatever text editor or IDE you're using. Again, as we talked about at the beginning, I'm going to use IntelliJ Ultimate Edition. You can use IntelliJ's Community Edition. You can use There are a whole bunch of different options here. But if you haven't downloaded a version of IntelliJ yet, there's a 30-day free trial for the Ultimate Edition, so I would go ahead and do that. But either way, let's try and follow along. If you have some questions or you're stuck on this part and how to open a Maven project in a particular text I'm just going to take a quick tour around. One of the things I like to do, I just like to rename this to application. I don't like these long main application class names, but yes, to IntelliJ, I'm just going to take a quick tour around. One of the things I like to do, I just like to rename this to application. I don't like these long main application class names, but you don't have to do that if you're not weird like me. So this is like a normal Maven project structure. So we have our source main Java. This package contains all our Java code. So we have our main package here, which was created based on all that metadata we filled out at the beginning in the Spring Initializer. And then we have our main application class. We'll come back to this in a second. We have resources. This is where we're going to have like static files or templates if we're building out like a UI. There's also our properties files. You'll also see maybe an application.yaml in here. That's also for configuration. So that's where that's our resources. Then we'll have a test package, and under test we'll have Java, and then we'll have a package mirroring our package structure in our application class. So we are in here, and then we have this .maven, Maven command, and these are the Maven wrapper. So this means that you don't have to have Maven installed on your machine to be able to run this application. There's kind of a wrapper included in the project. And this is nice because if somebody else downloads your project, they don't need to have Maven installed. It makes everything so much easier. The pom.xml is where all of our dependencies are declared. So this is the Maven build tool. It has dependencies, it has build plugins for things that we might need to do. Again, these are the things that we picked at the beginning. So if you wanted to kind of drill into these are what's known as Spring Boot starters. This starter includes a bunch of other dependencies, and it's an easy way to get up and running without having to figure out all of the things that your application needs. You can to look at the other dependencies in there. So all of that is kind of the basic project structure that we get right out of the box. All right, so the main application class here is it contains the main method. So you know in Java, every Java program needs a main method, public static void main, takes an array of strings called args, and then in here it is using the Spring application.run method, passing in the class name with the args, and this is how the main application runs. So now that we know that, let's figure out how to run the application. So we can run the application a couple of different ways here in the IDE. So we have these play buttons, so you can run the actual class. You can come up here and hit the run button. So I'm gonna just do it here, and we're gonna go ahead and click run. You'll see some things going on in here, one of which is, hey, the port that you're trying to run on is already in use. So you may have that if you have like other applications running. No big deal. Let's just go ahead and take care of that right away. So one thing you can do is use this tool called JPS and see which ones are running on which port. In this case, I know that I need to kill this particular one. So 92464. 92464, Dan. And now we should be able to go ahead and run our application, and everything's running. So we said that there's the Maven wrapper included, and we can actually run this from a command line. I'm using the terminal integrated in my IDE. You could use whatever terminal you use, pop open that, and go ahead and run this using Maven. So I'm going to say Maven. So look at this. So we have .mvn. We have .mvnw, so mvnw. And now I need to give it a command. Now, what commands are available?